So this is going to be a bit of an interesting podcast because I feel like this is the type of podcast that made me hesitate for so long before I decided to just bite the bullet and do it because all the other ones that I've done, like solo ones, have been so heavily personal, that like no one can tell me I'm wrong because it's my truth and it's how I perceived situations. But this next one is like more so addressing um like public views on things and how I don't necessarily agree on them. So this is kind of more of an episode where people could come at me. And I feel like this is a very big build up, but I mainly just find it super fascinating. The mayor versus gelding debate, and it's so interesting because I feel like mayor people are super mayor people, and geldings tend to be like very much like gelding people. And like I'm not saying that I don't fit into that. Like people who know me well found it hilarious that I had a gelding. Um, but he was quite mayor like. He yeah, I had more of a mayor like relationship with him than some of the very like straight and narrow geldings that I know. Dickens was quite flamboyant, if you will. Um, and yeah, I rode him like a mare where it was a little bit more of a conversation and like let's work together versus I feel like in the geldings that I have worked with and chatting with my friends who are very much gelding people, it's a little bit more like, no, dear sir, this is what I need you to do. Please just do it. And they kind of go like, okay, yes, ma'am, I'll do that. Um, and especially so I now have a mare and I love Dickens with my whole heart, but I can't even begin to explain how much joy it brings me to have a mare. But it's so interesting talking to people about having a mare. And just like people again, people have like really strong opinions. It also happens she's a registered chestnut mare. She's a liver chestnut, so she's a little darker. But she's a chestnut mare, and people have really high opinions of chestnut mares in terms of like the sass. um the sass that comes with it. But I think for me, like one of the things that like made me stand out and want to talk about this, and I'm not, this is where I feel like I need to be so careful. I'm not shitting on anyone. Um, but for example, like my mare is pretty girthy. Um, and I've had the vet check it out. She doesn't think it has anything to do with ulcers. Um, I've only had osteo out once. I've had her massaged as well. And she was saying, it actually made me chuckle. She's like, her tricep and her lat just kind of like one. They've just kind of blended together and there's a fair amount of tension there. And that's essentially like where her girth will be done up. So whether it's tightness from that, but quite a few people when I like it in that, quite a few people have said, like when I've noted that she's girthy, they're like, well, she's a mare. And I'm like, when did that become an okay thing to ignore that she clearly either has discomfort? And yes, I'm sure some of it is habit, whether she's anticipating that it's going to hurt or whatever. But I don't think that it's fair to use that as a reason to not address it further. Like, she's a mare. This mare wears her entire heart and brain out in the open. Like she's the most expressive horse I've ever worked with in terms of like the side eye or like big lips and chews, big size, big full body shapes, and like super, super expressive in terms of letting me know exactly where her thoughts and her feelings are. And I love that. And I'm not saying all horse people, but I also know like not a lot of horse people yet. Yet it's getting better, but there are still horse people that don't honor that. and don't like, no, she doesn't get away with murder. Like, my safety comes first. No, you can't bite your mom. No, you can't kick me. And like those physical safety boundaries are very firm for me. But when she does get a say, in my opinion, in, oh, you don't like that, doesn't mean I'm going to go at it harder. Okay, what can I do to ease that discomfort or ease that anxiety or whatever is the reason? And I think that right there is why I love working with mares. And I like, my gelding and I had such a beautiful, complicated, like, kind of, um just I think both him and I were both just so scared to lose the trust in one another. And it was such a special relationship. And yes, in the fact he's a little mare, like I really had to earn that with him. He had quite a few walls and was pretty guarded. But once I earned that trust from him, he would have done anything for me. Oh, tear up. But he would have done anything for me. And I proved time and time again I would do anything for him. But with mares, like, I don't feel like they have that initial, yes, I trust, like, you gotta earn that shit. And you have to earn it with consistently showing up and being willing to work with them. And yes, that applies for all horses. But I just kind of feel like, in a way, mares force you to hold yourself at a higher standard and to truly check in with where you are at that day and how you are presenting yourself in their presence. And I think that's fucking fair. Like, yes, queen, absolutely. Like, you don't need to carry my shit. And yes, I need to put my best foot forward for you. But I feel like all of the, especially, like, I have several chestnut bears in my life that I've worked with that just, like, will forever hold such a special place in my heart. But yeah, I worked for that, and I show up consistently, and I care about that relationship. And I'm not just here to, yes, I love to ride, but for me, it's not a sport. For me, it's the being first, that horse first, their well-being, mentally, physically, socially, emotionally, whatever, they always come first. And I think it's one of those things, though, where I respect the hell out of people who say they are gelding people, because this is the first mare I've owned. I've worked with quite a few mares. I've had really deep soul bonded connections with quite a few mares. And I just typically feel more, I just typically feel more drawn. I have two female dogs. I have yet to ever meet a male dog where I'm like, oh, you would fit really well in my world. I don't know. I like the bitches, and I like them to have some backbone, and I like them to have sass. And sometimes they run my house instead of the other way around. But I don't know. That's just, I've always been drawn to that. But I respect the people who don't want that. And like, my mare that I have now, she's the first mare that I've owned. And yeah, like, I do see the fluctuation. Like, when she first came, she was having some trouble settling. And then she did have a heat cycle, and like, wow, that was a lot. And like, I feel like I could relate to that. A lot of anxiety. Yeah, she was pretty heightened. And again, like, as a female, I understand that. I also get anxious and crabby and whatnot. And for me, as her person, I don't mind having to modify my interactions with her, or give her a little bit more space, or maybe we don't ride for a few days because she's just feeling crabby. I don't mind that. In my world, that's okay. I don't need to ride every day. You're not expected to do this, this, and this. With that being said, we're kind of tracking her heat cycles. And if the next few are as intense, there's a really good chance we're going to be medicating her, because I also feel like that's unfair for her to feel like she's buzzing in her skin and losing her damn mind. And as someone, again, who can relate, who has some underlying, so noticing that I'm actually quite an anxious person. I hate that feeling, and I don't want her to have to feel like that. And I feel like even like with, I have a very anxious dog too, and I don't think it's me because my older dog has like minimal anxiety about things. But I also feel like animals are given to you, like you get the animal that you need at the time, whether you think you want that life lesson or not. But I think there is I think it depends on the issue, but I think sometimes we're a bit too quick to medicate. And then other times I think we tend to be a little hesitant to medicate. Like I know I had talked about anxiety meds for my dog. And when we were having that conversation, I kind of felt like I failed her in the fact that we were potentially, and we didn't end up medicating her. But it's because of our circumstances. I work from home. She's with me all the time. She can cope when I leave with my other dog. We'll see what happens when we need to address any other day. But it works in our life. I can make that work and I can be a support for her. But if we couldn't figure out what she needed, I don't want her to have to feel like that, because I know what that feels like for me when I can't self-regulate, and that sucks. And on the flip side, I know there's been a few barns where like almost the exact same examples. Like my mare just moved in, got her heat cycle, her whole world was flipped upside down. And I do know some barns that would have wanted to like medicate her right then and there. And I had said to my barn manager, my friend, like, if you think that is necessary, I'm game. But she also agreed, like, let's just see how it goes. I did end up giving her, I don't even know if it's working, but I love Herbs for Horses. They have a nice line. I like their line. I like that they check all the boxes in terms of like they actually have research, they have third-party audits, and they have a calming supplement. So she's been getting that in the evening just to help her transition. Again, whether or not that's done anything, I don't know, but just with time and consistency and doing our best to accommodate her needs, she's definitely started to settle. But that's been a bit of an adjustment in terms of like my gelding was quite, again, flamboyant, but I want to use the term, he could disassociate. Some people might say he was just easygoing, but I think he was just kind of used to like, okay, I'm in my stall now. Oh, okay, I'll go by myself because I can't have grass and my friends can. And I wouldn't say he was thriving, but he could cope. Where I cannot leave my mirror inside. If she's the only horse in the barn, she has a conniption. So in that case, is that like mare versus gelding or just different personalities? But yeah, I just think it's interesting talking to people because again, like I don't know if I've ever really met someone, like I've met people who they've had mares, they've had geldings, but they still typically usually have a preference. It's just finding the right fit for what works for them. And same like even when I was looking, like I've written off pintos, which is a little dramatic, but like I've had my 3 really, really bad scary falls were on 3 separate pintos. And I feel like pintos are just a little bit of a different breed. And I look at my friends and clients who have pintos, and they speak pinto, like they get that same way. Like I'm not drawn necessarily to thoroughbreds. Like I have nothing against the breed. I love several thoroughbreds, but I wouldn't want that for myself. And I look at the people who have thoroughbreds and thrive and do well with thoroughbreds, and they all kind of have that same level, unflappable, even, like they are super solid in themselves. And same with like dog breeds. Like I think it's such a personal preference, and I think there is something for everybody, but I also think people need to be realistic in what is going to work for you. And I think that's where some people potentially end up with matches where they've just kind of settled and they haven't either had the patience or the guidance to be realistic with what they are looking for their goals, but to also fit with you as your own being and the horse as their own being. And I feel like for that, I was very realistic of what I wanted. Like for me and all the shit that my body's been through, I did not, I do not need a 4-year-old off the truck thoroughbred. I do not need an imported warm blood. I, I need what I got. I'm super, super grateful for what I got. She's 20-year-old quarter horse, been there, done that, knock on wood, but like unflappable. I have yet to see her be thrown for a loop with everything that I've like literally thrown at her. Like I've brought pool noodles out. I've brought our big ball out. I've tried to get some sort of reaction. And every time she's just like, oh, look at that. Hit me with that and see what happens. But yeah, and that's what I needed. Like I had several people, well-meaning people, but send me like, hi, ma'am, the dog's going to join the conversation. I had several well-meaning people send me like $20,000 horses, and I'm like, y'all, I don't show, I don't compete, I don't need that, and I don't need that much horse. I want to feel safe. I want to build a little bestie, and I want to work for that connection. And I like things to work on. I like projects. Like my mare's 20 years old. She could use some better body composition. And I do that for a living with humans, like figuring out what movements are going to be appropriate for them. And I really love being able to offer that to my horses as well. So like she has her balance pads that we stand on. Lots of lateral movement to start to get it like loose through her neck, build up the side of her glute med. That's fun for me, and I like doing groundwork. I like putting in that foundation work, and also like I feel like that builds a connection at the same time. But yeah, I find the horse world fascinating, and I find it really, really cool when I work with a pairing where I'm like, y'all are made for each other. Again, like my one client and friend who has been with me forever, she has a Pinto, and I'm like, you speak his language. I don't speak that language. I don't understand what that needs. And it's working with those horse and rider matches where I always walk away feeling just so honored that I got to experience that relationship with them. And like vice versa, I've also had a couple of sessions with people where I'm like, I don't think this is the right match for you. Whether it's like personality clash, goal clash of they wanted a jumper and the horse that they have clearly would prefer to be a hunter. And for me, it always comes down to honoring the animal. And if you're not going to honor that, you need to find someone who's going to absolutely thrive with that horse, and the horse is going to thrive with them. But yeah, just that notion of if like I'm terrible in terms of once you are claimed mine, you are mine, and I do not let you go. When we did our interview, so I have both my dogs are rescues. And when we did the interview for our second dog, they were like, under what circumstances would you return her? I was like, honestly, I will nothing. I will live in pure chaos trying to make it work for both dogs without their needs being compromised. And I will absolutely compromise my own well-being in order to make it work. Because once you're in your house, you're mine, which is also why I know I would not be a good foster. I would keep all of them because you are mine and no one is going to be a better home than me for you. But I think like there's truth in that with dogs, and there's truth in that for horses. Like if you have a horse that isn't fueling your soul and you are walking away frustrated, just think there might be someone who their whole world, their whole dream is going to come true with that match. And I know that's gut wrenching and heart wrenching, and like I would suck at doing that unless it was not the right match. And like a lot of my riding career was done at a therapeutic riding stable, and I was part of their exercise rider team, where you're assigned a horse, or sometimes three in my case, and like your riding skill, your demeanor, like what that horse needs, like all of that is taken into consideration. But I got swapped around a fair amount, and like somewhat regularly, and I think I got used to like accommodating each horse. But I think there was maybe, well, there was one horse there's only ever been one horse in my whole life that I've been to work with. He infuriated me. I think part of that is the place I was in my life was not a great match. I did not have the capacity to work with that little shit. But other than that, like I think there were maybe two horses where I just didn't have that connection with them. Funny enough, one was a thoroughbred. But my brain just wasn't able to connect with them. My heart wasn't able to connect with them the same way I was with so many others. But yeah, I think it just comes down to understanding what you need as a human first, rider second. And in terms, like, for example, I need security first as a human. As a rider, I think I'm probably more skillful than I give myself credit for, if I do say so myself. But like as a human first, I need security. And so I got that. And I've been very, very grateful and very blessed with all the horses that I've been able to work with. That I've typically always had that. But yeah, I just think it's interesting that mare versus gelding debate I find hilarious. And I wouldn't say I've necessarily owned a gelding. I've worked with some geldings, the straight and narrow, no flamboyant shenanigans whatsoever. But I think it's unfair to minimize concerns with your mare just because they're bitchy, because I'm bitchy, but I'm never bitchy for no reason. Whether it's my hip hurts, whether it's I'm exhausted, maybe I am PMSing, who knows? But I think all of those things need to be honored and still explored and go from there. But most of all, I think it does, again, just to summarize, comes down to what do you need in your equine partner as a human first, rider second, so that you can therefore put the horse first and the sport second.